I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along. Friday, that's the day we do the healing program. And that's what we're doing right now in partnership with our colleagues at the African American Child Wellness Institute. And the theme this week really is a continuation of discussions we've had for several weeks, and that is the impact of trauma, the trauma of COVID-19, the trauma of the urban unrest, the trauma of oppression, of the witness of the death of George Floyd and the deaths of children that have followed. All of that we want to talk about from a cultural and a mental health perspective, but also talk about it this week in the context of education. So we're pleased to have with us one of the great ones in our community, Brother Eric Mahmoud, who is a thinker, a mover, and a shaker, a doer, the builder, the architect, and manager of the institution we all have come to know and love in North Minneapolis. Brother Eric, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Brother Al. Happy to be on with this distinguished panel here.
Well, Harvest Prep is what I know you as, but you've got many more names over the course of your development as an institution for educating our people. Take a minute, if you would, and walk us through the institutions you have created and maintained in this arena of education for our families.
Well, we're blessed to have a 30-year history in this community. Back in 1985, my wife actually started our school based on our vision of making an impact on our community. I'm actually from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, pretty tough neighborhood in Philadelphia. And so my idea of really giving back to the community and making an impact on the community was going to be focused on economics. But when I met my wife, she was a lot smarter than me. She basically said a fool and their money will soon part. And so therefore, education is the foundation for community development. And so she convinced me to quit my good job as an engineer and really join her in this educational quest, starting with our preschool program in our home, which was called Seed Academy. Then we expanded to a location on Golden Valley Road, which was in 1992 our first school, which was a private school, because there were really no charter schools at that time. We called that Harvest Preparatory School, going from the seed to the harvest. Then we converted from a private school to a charter school in 1998. And we continued with Harvest Preparatory School. And then in 2008, we began to look at the progress of our boys versus our girls and found that the only thing our boys were beating our girls in were suspensions. And so we decided that we wanted to create a boys-focused program that we call Best Academy, which was our second school that we created. And because of the success of Best Academy, in particular, working with our boys, we partnered with Minneapolis Public Schools and we created another school called Mastery School. That was in 2012. To make a long story short, we began to grow and we began to grow rapidly and actually grew too fast. And we began to lose our quality that we were very proud of. And in 2018, we decided that we would consolidate those three schools into one. So the official name is Harvest Best Academy, which is comprised of three schools now. We serve 800 students, kindergarten through 8th grade, 70% African-American students, another 29% are East African students. And so, again, it's been a wonderful journey, a baptism of fire at times, but we've been blessed to be part of this community over 30 years.
I'm curious. I just got off of another call, Brother Eric Mahmoud, with a youth leader in the Somali community. He was addressing the monthly meeting of the North Clyde Urban Coalition. You know Diana Hawkins, and that
Yes.
group is convening around drug abuse and the opioid epidemic. And he was particularly talking about that experience in the Somali community. You mentioned that what 30% of your student body is East African, presuming primarily Somali. So my question is, what has been the interaction? How have you integrated, if you have, the experience, the expectations of newly arrived Africans into the fabric of culture and learning of the classic or traditional African American family and community?
Well, it's been a incredible educational experience for me, bringing on the East African community, which really started in 2010. I remember probably a year before that, I was working with a contractor, and he talked about a mosque and a school that the Somali community built in South Minneapolis. And they raised several $millions in a short period of time. Now, this was without NBA players. This was without NFL players writing big checks. These were cab drivers, right, that pulled their resources together to produce an institution. Something very similar that we've done in the past. But I was amazed of their resourcefulness and how they were able to leverage culture to their advantage. And so it's been very interesting to see having, two cultures, even though we share the same melanin, right? The power of culture, having two cultures in the same building. And so we've learned from each other. So there's some cultural practices that certainly we've learned from the Somali community, and then there's cultural practices I'm sure that they have learned from us. Certainly our sojourn in America, we get a lot of respect from the Somali community for paving the way for some of the challenges that they face now. I think one of the biggest things, you talked about the opioid community. When you lose culture, those are the results of what you see. And so one of the things that I see is a lot of the youth, they have the culture, their traditional culture has been less important. And so therefore they kind of get caught up in the popular culture. And so therefore they suffer the same ills as many of our American children face.
What our guest this morning particularly said, Brother Abdi Rahman Mukhtar was his name. He was a former a youth worker at Confederation of Somalis in Minnesota. He also worked at Brian Coyle Center. He also worked at Hennepin County Library and other places. A good guy, good man. And what he is doing now is leading a program specifically addressing the opioid abuse impact on Somali men and women. And what he kept saying again and again and again was something about the denial of the community, about the impact of substance abuse in the Somali community. Obviously, the world knows that Islam prohibits the use of alcohol. And I think to the ordinary and often just person not paying attention, you presume that the culture, is not experiencing an issue with alcohol. But that presumption is not true. Nor is it true that the culture is not being impacted by both prescription drugs, right, like everybody else on the planet, certainly everybody else in America, but then downstream by illicit or illegal drugs, particularly marijuana and fentanyl. based substances. So it's a great conversation. And the question for me, Brother Eric McLeod, has to do with how we properly deploy or use the strength of a culture, not in denial, but engagement. And what change is taking place and must take place so that we can be effective in keeping our communities vital, alive, resilient, and growing, but not have our heads in the sand as the world destroys our body. So, any thoughts?
Yeah. So again, I just want to come back to the power of culture and how do we, and this is what our institution has been built on, right? Not just reading, writing, arithmetic. I remember I forgot the brother's first name. I think his last name is Palmer. I actually former journalist in Chicago. He came to speak at the University of Wisconsin when I was there a number of years ago, and he talked about, education is not just the learning of reading, writing, and arithmetic, is the learning of an ideological perspective through reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? And so just emphasizing the importance of culture. And so what we've tried to do is to really teach this ideological perspective through reading and writing and arithmetic, and really lift up the strong values, the African American values. And I'm saying all that to say culture is the foundation, and I believe culture is really the way that we can help solve some of these challenges, and it becomes a inoculation for a vaccine, if I can use that language, to some of these societal problems that our children, African American, African children, and white children, all children are facing right now. Because what's taught, in the American culture, if in fact you got a problem, take a pill, right? If you're challenged, take a pill. And so I think that's basically what we're experiencing. And so, you have panelists on this program that can speak to that a lot better than I can. But I just think that culture becomes this inoculation or this vaccine against some of the challenges, because one of the things that is it just runs through both African and African American culture, this whole idea of resilience. How do you bounce back from challenges? And is not taking a drug, right? It's how do I look at challenges and what do they mean? And so I think that the culture gives meaning to challenges. And so I think that's the value of teaching culture.
I use the phrase culture as an asset, not a liability. As a housekeeping note, I think we're getting feedback, and maybe Erica and everybody else, when you're not speaking, you might mute your mic, because somehow on one of our systems we're getting feedback. I'm not sure if it's better now. I see Ted is shaking his head. So let me take a minute and introduce the team here. We do this every Friday, Eric. We call this the Healing Circle, and the protocol, as introduced to us by Dr. B, is that we use a talking stick, and the speaker then hands the stick to the next person or somebody else in the group. But let me introduce the team, and it's a wonderful, exceptional team of professionals in mental health. Ted Thompson is here, Daryl Gillespie, and Tananya Hurd. I'm not sure if you know them personally already or not. They all are known and gifted contributors for community and for our family and for our culture. And then joining me directly is my colleague and actually kindergarten friend, Brenda Lau Gray, who's on our team and who reports on these conversations every week. And let me tell you, listeners, both locally and nationally, go to the upcoming edition of Insight News, 2 great stories by Brenda, and a cover story called traumatized for a second time. That was based on last week's program, I believe, when Attorney General Keith Ellison addressed the Healing Circle. Great event last week, great reporting on it by Brenda Lyle Gray. So with that, let me hand the talking stick to Brother Ted Thompson and to just build on the questions I've raised or introduce new questions and comments to today's conversation. The objective is to talk about children, particularly as we're all focused on going back to school. You have to unmute, Ted.
Sorry about that. Thank you. I appreciate the time. Nice to see everyone today. And, I really have to resonate with the idea that Brother Mahmoud put forth. Culture provides the context, it provides the fabric. In many ways, it provides the foundation, which gives then some kind of structure or direction or pathway for meeting the challenges that we face. I think we are facing a tremendous challenge as we look at the fall. Our children are going back to school, and the issue of safety is now a prominent issue because some people are vaccinated, some people are not, some people are partially vaccinated. And so there are mandates and restrictions from both the local and the state and the federal level regarding who can do what in relation to attendance if vaccinated or not vaccinated, mask wearing if vaccinated or not vaccinated. And unfortunately, this issue has taken on some politics, which then cloud and confuse the issue. In my mind, the focus should be the health and well-being of the children. In my mind, the issue really needs to be directed to the adults in the situation to, as Brother Mahmoud has said, create a cultural fabric that acknowledges the science and acknowledges that receiving the vaccination is probably the healthiest direction to take. No one can know in advance what the long-term effect of any therapeutic intervention is going to be. No one can say that taking the vaccine, whether it was the Salk vaccine or whether it's the flu vaccine or whether it's this vaccine for the pandemic, no one can predict the future. But in my mind, our best science-based direction right now is to get as many people vaccinated as possible so that as our children go back to school, the parents have set a cultural direction, a cultural acceptance, a cultural embracing of the science and the safest direction that we have knowledgeably at this point. That's what I would say. I pass the stick. We have other folks on. Tananya, I'd love to hear what she has to say on the issue as well. Or maybe I should pass the stick back to Brother McFarlane and he can pass the stick. That would seem to be appropriate.
Either way, I'll follow your lead. Tananya, good afternoon. Good to see you here. I still can't say how much I enjoyed our recent conversations. I wrote, I think, in a note to you or to somebody that as you addressed the passion of the moment, your presence was almost angelic. And so I want to say that publicly to acknowledge that's the power within that we bring when we go within and stand in our truth. And I simply appreciate you and applaud you for that courage and that charisma, that strength and that wisdom. So I'm going to pass the talking stick to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. McFarlane. It's an honor. I mean, all of this has turned into my life's work. And when I say work, I don't mean a job. I mean my own life's mission. So it's an honor to be here. And as far as our children and going back to school and safety, as I said in a smaller group, I really resonate with this subject because I have a 5-year-old that is going to school for the first time in kindergarten. He actually started a summer program. And so I've had the opportunity as a parent, as well as a COVID outreach team member. So it's kind of both sides of the fence that I've been on and watching this progress. And the first thing that's key is I recognize that our schools, and even our early childhood education programs and administrators, they are one of the most important parts of the infrastructure of our communities. They are there to provide safe and supportive environments just in general. But with the pandemic and coming back to school, it's particularly important to make sure that we are ensuring health and ensuring safe and supportive environments, that we are reassuring families as well as staff that we have to do planning and use a lot of different comprehensive strategies, because people are on so many different sides of the fence on whether or not they want to be vaccinated. And so we have to meet people where they are. But as administrators and public health officials and so on, it is just so important that we understand people's preferences and express concern for that, but also provide as much learning and care as possible. And with that, I'll pass the talking stick back to you, because I can go on.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to pass the talking stick to Brother Daryl Gillespie. And while you have that, I want Eric to think about describing how your institution handled its work both last year and how it's planning to handle its work at this stage of our response to COVID-19 for the year coming up. Brother Daryl, the talking stick is yours.
Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me a chance to be part of this as well. Dr. Thompson and Ms. Hurd talked about the importance of safety from a health standpoint. When I was thinking about this question, and I think about what Mr. Mahmoud said about culture being a vaccine, I think culture allows us the opportunity to be in relationship in a different kind of way with kids that look like us. And I think we have to take our rightful place, if that makes sense. I hate to always come back to Mr. McFarlane taking his rightful place with me and empowering me to get the vaccine, but it's a powerful story. And that situation has helped others in my circle get vaccinated. And so us talking about the importance of vaccination and getting our kids prepared to go back to school, we do have to meet them where they are, Ms. Hurd. And sometimes people have a whole lot of questions and they have misinformation. And so misinformation, we as a culture have to get some information that's solid, that can validate people's fears, validate why they're scared, but also push them past those fears to do what's right. And so as we think about our kids being healthy, I also, and I believe his name, Mr. Mahmoud, is Parker Palmer. And Parker Palmer also talks about how teachers can not only bring technique into the classroom, but they bring themselves into the classroom and all their experiences and all their lives, situations into the classroom. And part of going back to school and being safe, I also think we have to keep our kids emotionally safe. Everybody can't go to a Harvest Best Academy, so they don't have the Afrocentric care that happens in Mr. Mahmoud's schools. And so we as parents And as people that are community leaders, we have to hold teachers accountable and all that stuff. We had a physical pain of having or not having COVID and how we deal with that. But we also had a pain of kids when they raise their hand or they're trying to do well, teachers not calling on them, teachers not affirming them, teachers not really understanding how we learn differently. And all these things are so important. So also, as we get ready to go back to school from a health standpoint, we also have to understand academic safety, and we have to understand emotional safety. And we have to have these kind of conversations with our parents to help them know even how to have these conversations, know what to talk about, because it may seem so trivial, but it's not, because you have so many people, adults, who have situations that happen in school that scar them for the rest of their lives. And so, again, we have a lot of things to deal with. But I think if we take our rightful place, because culture says we learn from our elders, and our elders teach, and they teach us, so we may teach those that come behind us. So I think there's a system that has broken down, and I think we have to do what we can to try to rebuild and continue to help those that we have contact with. And I'll pass it back. I'll give it to Mrs. Gray.
Well, pass it to me, and I'll
Okay,
introduce
I'll give it to Mr. McFarlane.
Sister Brenda again. And I want you to know that Brenda has a career in education and in leadership, and has a passion for writing about it, describing it. And so with that, I'm going to pass the talking stick to Brenda Lyle Gray. There you go.
Before I go into it, when Pastor Gillespie started, I thought about Emmanuel Cleaver, Al, and a sermon. One of my favorites was Jesus Was Ticked. And I can just see him on the pulpit now talking about how the community is ticked. They're tired of their babies dying. And Dr. Thompson and Dr. B and the passion of Yeli Akansanya. I mean, we've got to get started with the kids. We have got to be able to break that prison, our pipeline from the classroom to prison. And that means that we've got to start with training with the teachers. And I keep saying it over and over, when we have 87% of our teachers that are white. And we have to think of training. I'd love to get back to, I can't think of his name. We've interviewed so many people, but he's with the state college. He's the chancellor. And somehow I think we need to start getting with chancellors of the universities and looking at the training in education and how we are producing teachers that are going to be addressing our next generation. Because 2020 has taken the breath out of everyone, and we've got to bounce back. And I just so appreciate people understanding what Dr. B says all of the time. Our children are our most vulnerable, and they have got to be at the top of our list. So I hope they come up with some type of understanding about masks. I was watching it on the news today. It's a mess. It is a true mess. And we're about, 4 weeks, or in some places have started already, because we have to decide how we're going to keep our kids safe. And that means getting to school. So anyway, I'm going to pass it back to Al, and enjoying the conversation as always. Mute it.
Thank you, Brenda. Before I pass it back to Brother Mahmoud, I always have this picture in my mind, Mahmoud, when one of my grandkids, several of whom have been at the Harvest System, I went to one of your annual, must have been a performance or child I'm not sure what it was called, annual program. This one was at Sabathani. And I remember Miss Filoki was the drill team instructor. And I can't get out of my mind and out of my heart and my feeling, my spirit, the power of children doing precision drilling. And I can't get out of my mind the lyric that they marched with and through that left me both speechless and inspired. And the lyric was, with total fearlessness, into the enemy camp we march. And I said, whoa, that's how you create warriors, people that are marching into the enemy camp. And that camp I take to mean any ignorance, any adversary, any thing that stands against our dignity, our humanity, our possibility, our future, the vision we have for creating a world in which we all thrive and survive. And so I understood and felt and saw the marvel of this instruction that you were providing, not only to the children, but to and through the instructors, and to and through the parents, and to and through the community, encouraging us to understand and to learn and to grow this sense of both commitment and, at one level, invincibility, inevitability. Even though we're human, even though we die, even though we fail, there has to be something beneath us that brings us through these challenges with a commitment to being invincible, a commitment to winning. So with that, I hand the stick back to Brother Eric Mahmoud.
Brother Al, you almost brought tears to my eyes. You just made me reminisce, because it's interesting that you thought about that and remembered that. I had to actually use those words very recently to lift myself up, right? I had to use that quote unquote performance to lift myself up, because the exact words are, I went back to the enemy's camp to take back what they took from me. And so yeah, I like I said, I had to use that to inspire myself. So thank you for reflecting on that. And I think it just underscores, and that was like 20 some years ago, and you still remember that. Right. So let me speak to your question about what have we done and what are we planning on doing as we go forward under these very challenging circumstances. As we all know, I don't have to quote statistics. Our community has been challenged in many areas, and education is one of those many areas. And I remember in my educational process, being from Philadelphia, it seemed like there was a teacher strike every other year. And I remember when I was in 7th grade, literally, I was not in school for a whole year because of the teacher strike. And because I was so young and dumb, right, I thought that I was getting over. And actually the system was getting over on me, because when I got to high school, and certainly when I got to college, it was very difficult for me to keep up with all these other people from around the country. And now I attribute it to that 1 year that I missed, where I missed the foundations of math, the foundations of writing, the foundations of reading. We just had almost 18 months of students missing a whole educational process. And the impact of that is going to be, felt for a very, very, very long time, unless we come in and try to make up that lost ground. And though it has happened to everybody and impacted everybody, it impacted us the worst. And when I say us, I'm talking about our community, because we were already behind. So one of the things that I reflect on back in March when the schools were shut down. You know, we had these stay-at-home orders. I was talking with my good friend Lewis King, and so we were talking about what is the impact of our children not being able to go to school. And what we said was, actually, there's going to be two things, okay? Number one, our children won't have access directly with their teachers. And so what we said was, just like everybody around the country, we need to be able to access and have laptops or Chromebooks for every one of our students. So within a month, and it was a real fight, within a month, I was able to secure 750 Chromebooks for my 750 students. The problem was, even though every student was able to receive a Chromebook, only 50% of them were turning it on, okay? Why? Because I didn't solve the second problem. The second problem was a conducive environment for them to learn. The home is not a conducive environment for them to learn, right? There could be, even if all of the children and the parents were studious and they were focusing on their studies, all of them are not on the same grade level. So you have them talking to their teacher, all a real challenge. So one of the things that we said was, what if we were able to create spaces where children could actually, safe spaces where children could actually learn in an environment that was conducive to learning. So we said, what if we had what we call a mobile learning lab? So we created this mobile learning lab. We contracted with a charter bus company that had these luxury buses that we would only put 10 students on a bus, on a 56 passenger bus. They had, you know, bathroom on the bus. It was equipped with Wi-Fi, right? We ran a whole summer program last summer using that model, serving about 200 to 300 students. Then as we got closer to the school year last year, we said that basically that was a great idea, but it wasn't sustainable, right? You don't have enough buses to distribute through all of Minneapolis and St. Paul. So then we said, okay, what if we were able to leverage underutilized assets in our community? So during the day, the churches aren't being used. The YMCA is not being used. Community centers aren't being used. And so what we did was, to make a long story short, we secured funding that we were able to leverage these assets and actually pay, like churches, Zion, YMCA, other assets. They would provide the support from their particular community. They would provide the support, and the students from around, not just our students, but students from around the metro area, they were coming to these different assets. The teachers were actually bringing the instruction in virtually, but the environment was conducive for them to learn. This was very powerful. We served about 500 students during that period of time. As a matter of fact, you've probably heard the term learning pods. These became very popular because the rich folks were doing this. You know, they were securing a tutor, and basically we did the same thing, but on a larger level. Okay, so that's what we did last year. As a matter of fact, we were one of the few schools in the Twin Cities that was open for kindergarten instruction. I heard the sister Heard talking about her kindergartners starting last year. Kindergarten instruction, face-to-face kindergarten instruction was almost non-existent last year, okay? Because it's very difficult, if not impossible, to teach a kindergartner who don't even know the alphabets how to learn through a screen, okay? We were providing kindergarten instruction on day one, starting August 17th of 2020. The first 3 weeks, we got real creative. We actually provided kindergarten instruction under tents outside, okay? Because, because of the coronavirus, it's diluted by the outside air. We served about 75 students the month of August. Then we brought them in the building, but we had secured these air filtration units that basically that would circulate and filter the air down to 0.1 micron, okay, almost the size of a coronavirus, okay? And then we had all of our students wearing masks. So those are some of the things that we did last year. For the reasons that the panelists talked about, I think it's going to be even more challenging this year, because even though we believe that we're done with the coronavirus isn't done with us, okay? It is in some parts of the country, it's actually worse, especially amongst the unvaccinated. So the challenges that we have now that the CDC has said, you don't have to wear masks, which is controversial, right? We've kind of given people the idea, even if you're vaccinated, that you don't have to wear masks. We're not following that in our institution. Everybody's wearing a mask, okay? Until we have a better feel for what is going to happen going forward, I'm taking a belt and suspenders strategy. So I'm fully vaccinated, I'm wearing a mask. Teachers are fully vaccinated, they're wearing a mask. Because the children that are under 12 cannot get vaccinated yet. So I have my 88-year-old mother who is coming to stay with me, right? Even though I'm vaccinated, I could give her, pass on the virus to her, even if she's vaccinated. You've heard about these breakthrough situations that even if you're vaccinated, you still can be affected. So I think the challenges that we face now is maybe even more difficult because of the uncertainty. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty now, masks, not masks, who's actually vaccinated. Is the situation getting worse or is it getting better? I think that there's going to be even more challenges.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Any questions, any comments? I'm going to pass the talking stick back to Ted Thompson first, and then Ted, you can pass it around the room.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Great reflections. Absolutely great reflections. As I think of it, we as a people have been compelled to shift, to innovate through history in the face of the challenges, in the face of the ways in which the larger society has attempted to diminish and exclude. I think this is another challenge. And I think that we would benefit from gathering together to unify in an understanding and direction that essentially protects the next generation. The ability to innovate, that is in our bones. The ability to create and to circumvent the obstacles placed in our path, that is in our bones. We are still here. And so I think we need to bring those abilities, those talents, that strength together to face this challenge. That's what I would say. I'll pass the stick.
Thank you. Let's go to pass the stick to Brother Darrell Gillespie.
as you all were talking about, you was watching the kids say their statements, and Mr. Mahmoud said he went into the enemy's camp and got his stuff back. I'm not gonna get preachy, but there's a text in 1 Samuel chapter 30 where David is in Ziklag, and when he was in Ziklag had came in and took all his army's possessions and had took the women and everybody, and his folks his people turned against him. And so the text says David had to encourage himself. And as I listened to Mr. Mahmoud talk about those innovative ideas, I think about us and how much people steal from us and how much they continue. And Dr. Thompson says we have all that we need. I think we are seeds. A seed has everything in it that it needs to reproduce and to do something. And I think we have to be innovative, and we have to tap into our ancestors and all these ideas to really combat all these things that are going on. And we have to keep the mental attitude that we're gonna beat this. We are a strong people, and because we're a strong people, I don't think there's anything that we cannot accomplish or we can't overcome. So I say, what is COVID to what our people have been through? And what is we have to continue to be assertive and to do the things necessary to help our kids. And again, having buses, coming up with these safe spaces and all these different ideas that we can come up with. I think we have to dream big and not look at the limitations, but look at what can happen. If the cab drivers can bring some money together and get this mosque, what can we do with all the people that we know, with all the education that's on this panel right here? We have enough thinking power to do anything. And I think we have to stay motivated and diligent in helping this cause. And I'll pass it back to you, Mr. McFarlane.
And I'll pass the talking stick to Tananya Hurd.
Thank you. I definitely agree with everyone on this panel. And, that just brings me, Brother Gillespie, to just what I've been thinking about. Of course, promoting vaccination, that's important. But keeping our kids safe, especially the ones 12 and under, there has to be strategies such as what Mr. Mahmoud has said that he's already put in practice. This needs to be put in practice statewide, worldwide, because, and I'm saying that because I felt when you said that, even though you're vaccinated, you're wearing a mask, and, the staff are wearing masks, and the children are wearing masks, and sending my son to this pre-K summer school, he was masked up and ready, and they're like, oh, he doesn't have to wear a mask. And that was so very concerning to me. So, I think that, of course, like I said, vaccination, but consistent and correct use of masks, definitely making sure that we're having physical distancing in school. Also, as you mentioned, Mr. Mahmoud, I was also thinking about the ventilation, and that's something that could definitely help. And then, for our students, especially that are 12 and younger, a lot of the times they don't get the social skills such as hand washing and respiratory etiquette. We need to, as caregivers, as of course as parents, but as teachers, this needs to be part of this needs to be normalized, where we are teaching and enforcing hand washing, for at least 20 minutes, 20 seconds, where you're singing a song or whatever you need to do, just reminding everyone in the facility to wash their hands frequently. When it's not possible, hand sanitizers. I just think these are really, really important ways to help with prevention because we have no choice but to, move forward however we're going to move forward. But posting signs in facilities, setting up hygiene stations, staying home when we're sick. We have to stay home when we're not feeling well and also get tested, because there are a lot of people that I've seen, they're staying home, but then they don't get that COVID test. So how do you know that, you've gone back to work too soon? Let's see. Also, contact tracing, such as the same as if in schools when someone gets an outbreak of chicken pox or there's lice or something, there is a letter sent home letting parents know, letting caregivers know this thing happened. So I think we just have to do kind of the same thing and utilize those strategies with COVID going forward for prevention, if nothing else. And I'll pass the talking stick back to you, Mr. McFarlane.
I think Brother Ted has his hand up. Brother Ted, I'll pass the talking stick to you.
I certainly appreciate the wisdom of those comments. Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. I would say this: in the past, what I have noticed is that parents in community many times tend to defer to teaching staff and administration, which means that they tend to have a self-imposed idea that the teachers and the administrators know, and they should essentially step back or be silent or not participate. And I would confront that notion. I would encourage parents to come forward to participate in the school system where your child is enrolled. I would say that this particular pandemic, with the time at home, involving oneself in the teaching routine day to day, you have learned things. You have a voice. You have wisdom. Community needs to be able to participate in the school experience, and teachers need to understand that community has information and responses and reflections which need to be taken into account and granted credibility. Teaching systems, school systems, graduate systems do not take into account the necessary cultural understandings that really help the community to prosper and to advance. And so old systems, traditional systems are not enough, especially since we have many populations of people who have joined community. When you think of Hmong population, the Vietnamese population, Latino population, Somali population, Ethiopian population, when you think of the number of youth and the traditions that they bring, and the information, the rich information culturally that can be imparted by parents into the educational system. This is how my child learns best. This is my concern. These are my experiences. That would be a wonderful change from community and the interface with the educational system.
Let me wrap up. Let me come back in and wrap up. We're about the end of the program and throw something out to you, Eric Mahmoud, kind of a big idea. I want to frame it with a couple of recent news events. One, we saw Van Jones get granted $100 million by Jeff Bezos' organization. Bezos said that upon completion of return to the surface of his suborbital spaceship, creating a new panorama, a new infrastructure for space travel. What Bezos said was two things. What Van Jones said to Bezos was that you've lifted the ceiling off of our mind and our sense of possibilities. That's what he said. What Bezos said was that he was building an infrastructure for the future, that he had a feeling when he started Amazon that he knew this was going to work, it would go to scale. And he had the same feeling about this suborbital flight and this new venture of space travel, creating a space infrastructure. So that feeling, and I say that to say that, Eric, what was the feeling when you started the harvest movement, and what is the feeling now as you prepare to take this to the next level? That's one thought. Second thought that ties to that is Branson. When he came back from his suborbital flight a week earlier, Sir Richard Branson talked about, the exhilaration, and the same thing about this not being just about billionaires having fun in space. It's about changing the paradigm, the expectations, and the possibilities for the future. Talk in the same vein about creating systems and infrastructure for the next level of human exploration and development and movement. But what he also did was say, oh, you know what? People are complaining about this thing being so expensive, and yes, it's expensive. But what if we created some kind of a lottery system or a process where people could just buy a chance at $10 each, and these multiples of $10 could be aggregated in a way that could afford a whole bunch of people to fly out of a lottery system into space, both for the learning and for the shift. And so you think about that. And the point I'm making is that 2 points. One is a big idea based on an experience, but then the monetization of that idea at a different level altogether, where he brings it to the masses and he invites the masses to show up and chip in $10. And this leads me back to your statement about cab drivers creating millions, right, to effect an education experience, an opportunity for the Somali community and Somali culture. How do we take this big idea that was reflected in a vision for space travel, for creating infrastructures to the future, and bring it so that ordinary people can take ownership of it, invest in it, and make it come into fruition? So those two ideas, Mahmoud, the bottom line for me is, how do we talk about the monetization of our experience without being accused of being about money and not our humanity? These things are not separate from my point of view, and we need systems, processes, tools for measuring movement and advancement. And among those systems is the nature and the intricacy, the volume of transactions between us that support our relationships, our living ability, and our capacity to grow and build. Eric, the talking stick, I pass to you to close out.
Wow, Al, that's a big job. You said a lot. So let me kind of focus on two things. Number one, kind of the big idea, and then execution, right? Because ideas don't mean nothing unless you execute on them. So number one, the big idea. The reason why my wife, myself, started Seed Academy, Harvest Prep, Best Academy, Mastery School, is because of this one big word, is the why. Okay, and my why started when I was in college. I had a roommate, and basically he told me that Black people never did anything, right? And it started my why. It started my quest to prove him wrong. And so I went to every seminar, I read every book about Black people, right? And that was my why. Okay. And so in reading that, in reading and studying, it was clear to me what my purpose was. And so when you ask, okay, how did it start? It started with the big why, right? And how do I feel right now? I'm as committed as ever. Okay. So I think it really starts with the why. And so, your program, the work that you've done, Brother Al, disseminating this information, you're sparking whys within the Twin Cities, within the country, and around the world. So this work that you're doing is absolutely critical. As I said, though, you can have a big idea, you can have wonderful ideas. And I have, people that I've interacted with, even some people that may work for me, they have big ideas, but it is very difficult for them to execute. You need to be able to execute. You need to be able to put systems, processes in place because, in order to produce, whether we're talking about a business or education, that's not an event, right? That's something that you have to do over and over and over and over again. The consistency has to be there, and you have to constantly improve the service or the product that you produce. So both of those things are married together. The big why, okay, that's what motivated Jeff Bezos, right? But you also, as Branson said, you got to be able to execute. So those would be my answers to that big question, several questions that you outlined: the why and also execution.
Listen, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you all for being here. Brenda, thank you for your work capturing this for stories for our readers in Insight News. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane, the Healing Circle. We'll see you again next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Oh, Queen Justice, where are you? Did they beat you up or no? Lock you on the ground, take the crown away from you?
Oh, Lady Liberty, red, white, and blue. Did they take your dignity with their bigotry? Teach you that you're born to lose.
Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you break.
We've had enough
of all the money you make.
We've had enough.
No more life gets taken.
We've had enough.
This is a proclamation.
It's been 400 years and we're 400 late. Together we stand from state to state. Going back in time won't make America great. We need justice now, people won't wait.
Action, no more distraction. Every step we take, we gain traction. If it can happen to one, it can happen to all. United we stand, divided we fall. Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you were breaking.
We've had enough
of all the money you were making.
We've had enough.
No more life gets taken.
We've had enough.
This is a proclamation. Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. You better believe, just roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you're breaking.
We've had enough.
All the money you're making.
We've had enough.
No more life gets taken.
We've had enough.
This is the proclamation.
We've had enough.
Trayvon Martin and Tommy Rice.
We've had enough.
Michael Brown and Eric gonna pay the price.
We've had enough.
Philando, Breonna, George Floyd.
What? We've had enough.
So many